I was living in Melbourne, and Jaden had come over and visited with us for a couple of weeks, and I had very much wanted him to stay in Melbourne with us rather than going back to Tassie. But, you know, he's a grown up and he has to make his own life and his own choices, so he decided to go back to Tassie. The day that the offence occurred was actually my youngest son's birthday. And I'd got home from work in the city in Melbourne, and I got a phone call from Jaden, and he sounded really distressed, and he said, "Mum, I think I've killed a man." There's a suspension of belief almost, you know, that sharp intake of breath, I guess, and my first thought was, oh my God, there's a mother out there that's lost their son today, you know, and whilst obviously Jaden was, you know, very distressed and in a bad way, that was my first thought. And you know, I asked Jay to explain what had happened, and he said, "Mum, I've just seen it on the news. I'm at a friend's place. I've seen it on the news." You know, we talked for a little while, and, you know, I suggested that he get a lawyer and, you know, contact a lawyer and contact the police. Working in Melbourne. Married, my second husband, so not Jaden's father. All the children come from my first husband. So corporate career, you know, working in the city. My second husband has bipolar, so I think at the time he was working. His health was relatively good at that point in our marriage, which was great. We lived in a little place in Hortense Street in Glen Iris. We rented, and we had the 3 children at home at that point, so the 3 younger ones, and 2 were at school. Oh, they're all at school, but they were also, a couple of them were working part-time and whatnot, but it was... yeah, it was a busy life, I suppose, you know, corporate job, a lot of pressure. You know, it's really devastating, and it sort of goes in a whirlwind, you know, those first few months. It's, you know, all those things that you've never had to think of before. I mean, I'd had a little bit of experience because my brother had been to jail, so I sort of knew, well, I've got to get my name on a phone list, and I've got to become an approved visitor, and I've got to get him a good lawyer, and, you know, all of those sort of things, and, you know, becoming more difficult maintaining contact as well, because, you know, I was interstate, which wasn't easy. You know, I worked full time, so, you know, the hours that they can call is really only, you know, during the day mostly. And, you know, so you're off taking phone calls and missing calls, you know, and thinking, oh my God, what's wrong? What's happened? You know, because you're in a meeting at work. And
I understand that the practicality clicked in.
Yeah.
But what about this, like the whole family? You have to inform people about what happened. Did you talk to...
well, it was Dylan's birthday, and we chose not to tell him. We chose not to tell the children for a few days whilst we sort of, you know, got our own head, or, you know, got my own head around it. So we didn't tell him. We didn't tell him until the next day. But he always remembers that. It's like when something like that happens on your birthday, it makes a big, it's a big thing that happens in your life. And, you know, it's really confusing for them. They didn't really understand what was going on. There wasn't, because we were in Melbourne, in a way it was a blessing, because I think it would have been a lot more difficult if the kids had been going to a local school, because it was all in the papers. I mean, it was a stabbing in a public place between 2 young people, so it was highly publicised. you know, in the middle of a Target store, in the middle of the mall. You know, you don't really get any bigger than that. So I think, you know, it was great that we weren't in the state, because I think if we had been in the state, the kids would have had to have dealt with a whole lot more, with kids at school in particular.
Were they trying to kind of reach out and tell you what to expect?
No. You sort of have to muddle along.
So you're on your own.
You're pretty much, you're on your own. Yeah. And, you know, like I said, because my brother had been in prison for a short period of time, we sort of knew some of the things you have to do. But yeah, you're on your own.
But if you don't, then
you don't.
Then what do you do? You Google.
You Google things. That's right. Pretty much what you do. You talk to the lawyer, right? And I think that the lawyer that Jay had when he made his statement didn't give him very good advice at all, because I think people are much, whether they committed an offence or not, I think they are better to keep their mouth shut until all the evidence and the facts come in before making a statement. I think when you make a statement, and I advised Jaden not to make a statement, but his lawyer advised him to make a statement. He was in a very emotional state. He wasn't remembering things well. You could tell he was very panicked and very freaked out, basically. Very freaked out. So you're not in a good mental place to recall facts, recall incidents, recall what happened. He was, just 20. Yeah.
Still a kid.
He's still a kid, yeah.
Okay, so then you have to move your life a bit kind of back into Tasmania.
Well, then of course I had to fly.
To attend the trial.
I had to fly, yeah. Take leave and fly down for court. Yeah, that was very difficult. That was very difficult because I was by myself.
So was it kind of fear to come here and face the community?
No, not at all. It was more of I had friends in Swansea, and they came to the sentencing. But when it came to the actual trial, which was 12 months exactly from the date of the offence. I came down, I was by myself. I went to the court every day, and there was just me on one side of the courthouse. Just me. And on the other side of the courthouse, there was all of the victim's family, obviously. And it was very intimidating, to be honest. A lot of face tattooed boys. I wasn't sure what to expect behaviourally from them. The court staff were amazing. They were very lovely. And it was nice, particularly on the last day of the trial proper. They allowed me to show me how to get out the back so that, there wasn't all the cameras and all that sort of stuff. So they were very lovely. And the Adrian, the victim, his mother, had obviously spoken to all of because there was a lot of young people there, and their behaviour, they were good to me, which was very nice. And one of Adrian's cousins actually spoke to me one day as I was going out of the court, and we had a brief chat, which was nice. So it was very difficult, and seeing Jay very distressed, and it was traumatic. I'd been lucky because I did have some friends that were able to drop him clothes for court and all that sort of stuff, which was great. But they didn't fit properly, and it wasn't the same as if I'd been able to pick, what he wore, things like that. When your child is in pain, it's worse than if you're in pain yourself.
Were you allowed to see him at that stage?
Not
In person.
In person. I think I may have got a visit with him before actual court, but mostly it was just seeing him in the courthouse. So you don't get to sit and chat to him. So he's brought up from down the lockup. He's brought up and then he's taken back down. So you don't actually get to converse with him during the trial. Well, we were all fairly convinced that it would be self-defence, right? 2 against 1, because there was another person attacking Jane at the time. So we were reasonably confident that that would be a case of, self-defence, that's what the jury would hear and see. But there aren't really self-defence laws in Tasmania. Not like you would expect, I think. So you have, I think you go in with an expectation of what justice looks like for the circumstance, and it's often surprising when the law doesn't really marry up with that. So I think, it was a shock. It was a shock.
Shock when you heard 11 years?
Yeah.
No, it was more, actually, they pronounced.
Yeah.
11 was actually what he served.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
The first sentence was 20...
18, top of 10, bottom of 8. So, yeah. It was quite a shock. And it was, I think it was one of the most interesting things that happened was after the verdict, was done and the jury were leaving and I was still sitting in the courtroom, and one of the youngest person, young male that was on the jury, as he was crying his eyes out, he was bawling his eyes out as he left, and you just sometimes wonder what goes on in the jury room, don't you? But yeah, it was a big shock. And then there was about a week, I think I went back home, and there was about a week until the actual sentencing. And so I came back for that, and my girlfriends were there with me, which was nice. Yeah.
Do you remember this moment of seeing him after you learned that actually he's not coming home?
Yeah. I mean, there was a lot of tears, and it was. It was very difficult. It was very difficult. Yeah.
What they did to, what was their impact on your well-being at this stage?
I think, it's all the complexities of the logistical way of getting things done. Booking a visit, going to a visit, preparing for a visit, travelling to a visit, what's there's no privacy, there's no, everything's always done in front of other people, whether that's other prisoners and their families and corrections officers, or even if it's just officers, there is no, it's very hard.
But would you like to have somebody designated for this job to help?
Yeah, well, I mean, in Victoria,
a parent, for example, what do you have to prepare, how it's going to affect you more or less, because it's not a rocket science to know that parents are going through different probably phases of that.
That's right. I looked, because I was living in Melbourne at the time, I looked at what was on offer there, and organisations like VACRO over there that do a lot of work supporting people in court. It would have been lovely to have someone, because I was by myself, to have someone supporting me through that. And yeah, just working out how everything works, and you left what you've got to interact with is a website. That's what you interact with, and yeah, that's it. It's very difficult. It's very difficult, and there never seems to be any consistency, and you never know what to expect. And you might travel an hour and a half for a visit, for a 30-minute visit, only to get there and be 5 minutes late and not be allowed in, or the visit to be cancelled. They talk about case management, but if you don't have a consistent case manager for starters, or you don't have a good case manager, what's the point of it?
So how was Jaden's case manager?
Look, I think he had so many, it was very difficult to keep track of who was doing what.
Why so many?
They used to have a department called prisoner welfare. That's what it used to be called back in the old days, right? And those people were, if you needed an extra pillow, or you your mother had died, right? Or some other calamity had happened. Prisoner welfare team would go and get the prisoner and would talk to them about what happened and what goes on and blah, blah, how you get the funeral, all that sort of stuff. Then it became, they sort of scrapped that idea, then they professionalised it. And they have the Integrated Offender and Management Unit that work in a therapeutic capacity and case management capacity, right? But the case managers became the corrections officers themselves, right? And so you had this therapeutic treatment type professional group, and then you had officers, right? And officers were supposed to be doing the case management. Didn't really work. And they had a family liaison officer for a little while, and they had the kids' days, but then that sort of stopped with COVID. So, it's a case of the policies and the processes is so fluid, the whole, over the 11 years, that it was often hard to work out who was doing what for who.
And do you think Jaden was willing to cooperate?
Yeah.
Because Jaden was a father at that stage. He had a
so Jay,
child.
Jay and Tanita had a child, and Jay had gone in for an assault prior to the murder charge. He'd gone in for 6 weeks, and that was during the time that my brother was in prison. And during that 6 weeks, Department of Community Services had stepped in and taken Skylar's daughter, because he was seen by them as the primary caregiver. And so when he went away for 6 weeks, they decided it was time to step in. So that happened, and then of course when he was remanded on the new charge, that became pretty much a permanent thing.
So I understand the whole situation with the prior 6 weeks was not really working in favor in his case.
Well, no, I mean, like I said, I was lucky because he wouldn't have any contacts in there, right? He wouldn't have known anybody. He would probably not have had any friends to speak of in there. But when I did know he was going in for 6 weeks, I rang my brother and I rang the prison. And I said, my brother's in there. My son's about to go in there. I want them to be put together. And they were. Which, my brother, poor thing, he didn't enjoy it much.
Why?
Because Jaden was young, and my brother's my age. And there's a very different way of doing jail, I think, and having to mop up after a young fella, put his foot in it with other fellas. Occasionally, I don't think Sam really loved doing it.
Was he kind of easy for the correction? Because I understand as much as, I mean, every time I have a conversation, I think also the personality, everything in Risdon is so random and hectic and, you know, organically happening. Yeah. Some people go lucky, I don't know. If you don't have a certain personality, you can actually get a very different treatment than somebody with, you know.
So Jaden has a lot of empathy. He's a very caring young man. That's how he was as a young person. Grew up in a large family. Dealt well with other people. A good child as a parent, raising a child, a good child. So responsive to direction, intelligent. So, you know, he would have gone in there frightened, confused, but not aggressive. He was never an aggressive person, ever. He would have gone in there frightened and confused and like a child, I would imagine.
And what's the status of person with his, like, he killed somebody.
Yeah.
So once he enters Risdon, what is his position? Do you know?
Well, that's a bit of a mixed bag, isn't it? Because it depends on who you kill. Right? You kill a policeman, you're probably, you know, ranking it in the upside down world, right, of the prison. If you kill one of their own, you're in a he was in a dangerous position. When I found out that Adrian had been in and out of prison himself a fair bit and was sort of fairly well connected and well known by a lot of people.
That's the victim.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So once I sort of realised that, I knew that there was a potential for him to actually be in quite serious risk, right? You get a young one come in and, you know, wants to avenge or wants to make a name for themselves by, you know, harming Jaden. That was always a very distinct possibility in my mind.
So what do you do?
There was nothing you can do. Oh. You sit and you stew and you hope. And
but you can have you had a chance to talk to Jaden, so you probably had some kind of a strategy how to.
Well, I mean, there's you know, I sort of because by the time so my prison research and my interaction with the prison had sort of started. Kicking off when my brother went to jail. So my mum asked lots of questions, right? She's a real question asker. So she asked lots and lots of questions about what my brother was going to be like, what was going to happen to him, how could we help him, what could we do.
I have to ask you again, so why your brother went to prison?
Drugs.
Drugs.
Yeah.
Selling drugs.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. He started using drugs after a really bad divorce. He sort of went off the rails. So he went to jail. He was there for about 18 months, I think. I think his sentence was 3 years, roughly. So, you know, I'd sort of started learning all of this stuff. So I was in a bit more of a fortunate position, I suppose, in some ways. But I knew that I wanted to unread a lot of the things that I had read, you know, violence in prison and about the behaviours and, you know, things that happen. You know, you don't want to think about those things as a potential consequence for your child.
So was it a little bit of, on your part, like a kind of the way of escaping this whole situation by diving into academic space?
It became a way for me to stay connected with Jaden. Because we had, you know, when someone's in jail for a long period of time and you're living different lives, and it's hard to have even 10-minute conversations sometimes. By the time you start getting into the conversation and the 10 minutes is up, but, you know, it's hard to maintain. What do you talk about? They're doing nothing. No, zero most of the time, right? So there's not a lot of conversation on their end, and a lot of things they can't talk about. either because, and that's not even because it's recorded, that's because of the environment they're in. You can't be bagging out your cell neighbour or your cell buddy when they're sitting 6 feet in front of, so there's a lot of things you can't talk about. So you start to lose things to talk about, I guess. And so understanding penology and prisons and understanding that environment helped me to have things to talk about. It helped me to become informed enough. It's like if someone just loves frogs, right? And all they talk their whole lives about frogs, right? If you like them, you're going to want to learn about frogs. It's a sort of similar sort of thing, That was his life. Prison was his life. It becomes their life. So it's a unique environment, totally different to anywhere else. So I felt that by becoming, really understanding all of that stuff, and it would help me to help him. And I think it did, in a lot of ways. But I also think that, and I think it enabled him to advocate for himself and other people a lot better, And I also think the other fantastic thing that he did when he was in there was do, I think it was a Certificate 2 in Community Services with a TAFE teacher, and it was an inside-out course. So there were people from the proper TAFE class, right, came in to have a classroom with the prisoners who were also doing the same qualification.
So he was not completely doing nothing. It was that was the first thing.
Yeah. So occasionally a program will open up, or you'll get an opportunity to do something, which is great. And I thought that was probably one of the best things that he did while he was inside. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What about his psychological condition? I mean, you killed somebody.
Yeah. And
you lock in this environment where you actually also have to focus on your own safety.
Well, he already had PTSD because of the abuse from his father. And he'd been a recreational drug user and a part-time drug dealer. Young kids, that sort of thing. But I would never have said he was a drug addict or a junkie. But he is now. It was up and down. It's not consistent. So he was doing sometimes he was doing really well, other times he was doing really badly. He did quite well when he was in APSLE, in the drug rehabilitation unit that they had.
Was it good?
A couple of times. It was very, very good. Mm-hmm. Very good. It was a safe environment. It was a therapeutic environment. The people that were in there because they wanted to be in there. And they wanted to make change in their life.
You mean other people participating in the program? Yeah. So there was a good peer.
It's mentally, it was a really difficult journey for him.
So was there psychological help for somebody like Jaden I don't know what's going on in the head of person with this experience at this stage of his young life, but
there's not enough, and it's not the right environment for it. And that's the problem. It's not a place of healing. People don't get better. Even if there are opportunities for them to interact with professionals, there's not enough of it. You do a 40-hour course on learning to deal with your anger, right? A 40, session course even. How many thousands of hours are they serving outside of that sentence, outside of that course? It's a tiny impact, it's tiny. you know? And then you're not in an environment that you can practice those pro-social skills anyway, necessarily. So, you know, it is an uphill battle. I think there's pluses and minuses to doing the research in terms of the impact that it had on Jaden. I think a lot of people are very frightened of speaking up about things.
So who are the other people?
Other families of prisoners and other prisoners that I know are afraid that there will be consequences by staff members if they speak out about conditions, treatment.
But you do speak out.
I do speak out. I always said to Jane, I would be the worst prisoner in the world because I am not compliant, you know, in regards to we need people to model pro-social behaviour in there. We need staff to model pro-social behaviour. We need policies and procedures that will support pro-social behaviour. We don't get that. That's not what happens. That's not the reality. And so people fear repercussions, you know, and it's been evidenced. I've seen it before, you know, and they've seen it before. And so people are wary of saying anything, you know, and it's not just about fearing repercussions, but it's that, you know, that stigma around the community and the lack of understanding that people have about what it is really like. The thing that used to make me the maddest, I haven't done anything wrong. I haven't committed an offence. My granddaughter hasn't committed an offence. My mother hasn't committed an offence. Right? And yet there is punishment that's associated with that because of the system. And that's not justice.
But also I see it also the way that I think that you are the best person to look after from the perspective of the system, because you have actually access to your son, you have access to his emotions, you have access to his mental and physical well-being. So if the correctional services are simply abandoning you or making you feel unwelcome, they're losing the best friend.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Good. But not always, right? Obviously. There should be proper case conferencing with proper stakeholders, not just staff, right? Family. So that you're not being talked about. You're not having a report written about you, right? And I've watched the narrative change. Just a complete narrative change in regards to Jaden's offence. These things are publicly released by the parole board, and it's a total change of the narrative, even from what was in the paper in the beginning or what the sentencing was. So things change and evolve, and you don't get to you'll sit down and you'll talk to a community corrections officer who's about to do a report or whatever, and you don't get the right to view that report and see what she's written about what you have said. It's not like you provide a police statement and you sign it and says, yeah, it's your statement and that's what goes to court, right? It's not like that. You'll have a conversation with someone from community corrections, for example, about upcoming parole, and they will prepare their report in private, and secret, and you don't get to see it. It gets read to the person that's the prisoner. But I don't get to see it. I don't know what she said about me or what I've said, and whether I've said it or not. So narratives shift. It becomes, a chain of different ways of seeing people and talking about them, and that evolves over time as well. And you don't have any control. There's no transparency. There's no control. There's no input. And if there is input, you don't know what the output's going to be. So why would you give the input in the first place? So you become, there becomes a lack of trust then. And that increases with poor decisions, improperly implemented policies, and just some of the things that Jayden has gone through and experienced because of poorly educated and trained staff.
Can you give some example of that?
They're his stories, so I wouldn't want to share them.
When we're sharing this, you're actually, assessing the quality of your experience and Jayden's experience. Do you think it's kind of can be potentially bad for him when it's kind of going to be put publicly on?
Yeah.
So I just want to know that you are aware of that.
Yeah, no, I guess that's right. And look, I think
because Jayden is still there. Jayden is, and they're all humans. They're just humans. And they have,
That's right. They are just humans. But they have immense power over people's lives, and not just one person's life. But people aren't an island. Jay's got a family, he's got brothers and sisters, he's got a daughter, he's got a partner, he's got mum and dad, all of those things. And every decision and every decision has an impact on all of those people. Not just that one person. We're all connected.
Can you tell more about impact on his siblings?
Well, obviously there's a loss of relationship because it's very hard to maintain contact, meaningful contact, It was hard, I think, when the first time Jay came out, because he hadn't had much contact at all with his siblings.
After 11 years.
Occasional phone calls. My youngest daughter had gone to visit him in there. But, and even to me in some respects, it felt like a stranger was coming home. And I would be the one person that he maintained the best relationship with, But because you're not interacting with someone, intimacy and relationship requires experiences together. And if there aren't those experiences together, it's very hard to maintain that intimacy. You don't really know that person anymore. You haven't seen them make a cup of tea in the morning or have a bad hair day or, do you know what I mean? Like, you might have been told about some of those things sometimes, but you haven't experienced it. So they become like a stranger because you're not sharing experiences together.
Did you encourage your other children to stay connected to Jayden and visit?
Yeah, I did.
Mm-hmm.
I did.
And?
But young people, they live busy lives and they've got other things to do, and, it's not the same as when someone's there. It's not as easy, and they're young people. I don't think they're as disciplined in a way,
Mm-hmm.
They miss them. They miss them, I think, particularly, at those significant times, Christmases, birthdays, birth of their own children, because, in the time that Jayden was in prison, his closest sibling in age was his elder sister, and, she'd already had 4 children in that period of time. His youngest brother had a child, his oldest brother had gone overseas to Korea. They haven't spoken even on the telephone for 5 years, you know.
So he just vanished from their world,
Yeah,
more or less.
Pretty much they do.
Do you have anyone in the family who actually rejected him because of what he did?
No. I didn't even have a friend that rejected him. Any of his school friends that rejected him. Because they also thought the same as I did, self-defense. 2 guys in a shop. One's been in and out of jail. He's just had his methadone dose. And a fight breaks out. You know? So all the people that know Jaden as a person, and lots who do believe that it was.
So the whole close and extended community of jail has this kind of, they got the message that system actually failed in relation to Jaden's story.
Yeah.
Starting in his trial.
I think so. I think so. And I think there was a lot of recognition of that. You know, I can remember Jay saying, and this was when he was at the remand centre, and it's not a very nice thing for a person to say, but an officer said, congratulated him. Congratulated him on killing Adrian.
That's a bit sick.
Well, it's very. That's the type of people we're employing to look after people who are prisoners. Yeah, but he knew Adrian, obviously, because Adrian had been in and out, and yeah, he congratulated Jaden.
Also, I wanted to ask you if you can go just explain this whole timeline of you getting involved in, because of course of your PhD, your research, and then the Facebook profile.
So what happened was when my brother, not long after my brother had been in the prison, I decided to do an honours year for my degree in adult vocational education. And that was when there was just Ron Barwick. They were starting to build Risdon, the new part. And I decided to do an honours year, and it was called Learning on the Inside in Risdon Prison. And I wanted to look specifically at what people learned education-wise, and criminologically. And so I started that and completed that, and then I felt that I really didn't know enough about the criminology side of things, and because I'd been working with just the one supervisor for that project, I decided to go and do a grad cert in criminology. And so then I decided to do the PhD and have a supervisor from each site, each discipline. Mm-hmm. So education and, because, it's 2 different languages, 2 different disciplines. So I did that. But I started the Facebook site 13 years ago now, roughly, which is called Tasmania Prison Service Exposed, because obviously the more time you spend with prison, the more you realise it's a locked community. It's a gated community. It's away from the public profile. It's not thought about. It's not considered. It's not transparent. It's the absolute opposite. It's opaque and dark. So I decided to start the page to sort of start to raise awareness about things that were happening at the prison, and things that people told me and wanted to raise but were too frightened to raise themselves, and just to bring some of that into awareness, really.
But how the community responded to you? Because you have some followers, you said.
Oh, yeah, I've got a few thousand followers now.
So how happened? How it's kind of keep rolling? Word of mouth or?
Yeah, a little bit. It's sort of, I never really, it was never an intention to change the world through it or make it big or, do you know what I mean? Like, it's not something I've really focused much on, in my life. It's something that just sort of ticks away, and occasionally when something happens, I'll post something. Or now, there's been certain times when it's been bigger than it has been, and I've had more interaction. So I'm having a lot more interaction with people.
And this is where you talk as a mum or you talk as an academic on this page?
Both.
Great.
So
this is this type of online community for Tasmanian.
Yes, as far as I'm aware, it is the only one. New South Wales has a couple, or now in most states there is a Facebook community for, and different states slightly different. Some have a whole state approach. Others have Facebook groups for different prisons, right? Because sometimes things happen specific to that prison. So, over the years it's been quite interesting, some of the comments and things. Sometimes you post something and you think, it's not really, and it blows up.
So what is the most popular subject on this?
Visiting's big topic, always has been, because it's the thing that affects us on the outside the most. Visiting, phone calls, canteen sometimes, things that we have to pay for. The way people are treated at the visits, the way the visits are organised, how simple it is to book and get a visit, how well their communication system works, sometimes it doesn't. And obviously that's evolved a lot because of COVID. It's been a massive impact. And it's a lot easier now. You can just fill out a form to become a approved visitor. So it can be, really simple to do some things now. Back then you had to get a form and it had to get posted out to you and you had to fill it out and then you had to post it back. Weeks later. So it is a bit better, I must say.
And Zoom, yeah. Zoom.
And Zoom, they didn't have video. Well, actually, we did have video visits before COVID because I used to use video visits because I lived on the mainland. So I went to Sydney 8 years ago, 8 or 9 years ago. Lived in Sydney for a while. So I'd go to an organisation and I'd be able to Zoom from there. So it wasn't your private thing, it was through an organisation. And I used to go to the Door of Hope in Launceston and do the video visits that were run by the chaplain there. And they've been great. They're a godsend because, it's extremely, particularly if you're in the north or the northwest of the state, it can be your only contact. Because if you're on an unemployment benefit, there is no way you're going to afford to be able to pay to go all the way down for a 30-minute visit. It's $100.
Why is 30 minutes?
Well, depends on where you are. And you can't have a double visit anymore. You used to be able to, like if you were coming from a long way away, you used to sometimes be able to book a double visit so you could have an hour, right, which was great. But, you had to go through jumping all the hoops, or the prisoner did, to get that double visit approved, and then you had to book it, and then you had to go for it. But now, it's really hard to get.
If people are coming to visit prisoners with their children, 30 minutes is just impossible to actually have a quality connection in 30 minutes with young children, if there's few of them.
Well, not only that, but, in terms of, we need to have a proper visit facility. A proper visit facility. I mean, if they're going to be dragging people from SRC to go and use the one at Reeston, why don't we have one that's not in the complex? Move people. Okay, you might have to have a separate one for max visitors, potentially, and non-contact visits. But we could have a proper, they do in a lot of other states and countries. We should have conjugal visits. Why don't we have conjugal visits? What is the problem? Why should
punishments?
And you're not just punish. That's the thing. It's the spread of the punishment. you're not just punishing the person, you're punishing their whole family. For some people, you're denying them the right to have a child.
Which is in a conflict of human rights.
Absolutely, in conflict of human rights.
Because the people have rights to have privacy.
There's no life
and family life.
There's certain basic things, right, that people don't get. There's no library. There's a library in one facility. There's not really free access to books. There's not free access. You know, you can have a PlayStation, but why do we have laptops? Why don't they have tablets in their cells? Why do we build a whole new facility? SRC, no tablets in their cells. Tablets can provide education, contact, professional visits, administration, canteen lists, checking on your phone account money, checking on your bank account money, all of these things that are currently, the whole prison's run on bits of paper, you know. Oh, got lost. Well, funny that. Yeah.
But also give people a little bit of access to management of their own life and their own affairs. Otherwise, they just
self-service. Absolutely, absolutely. Be able to make your own. The more you take off people, the less skill they have. De-skilling people, and you are damaging relationships, and you are excluding people from their lives that need to be in their lives because they're the ones that are going to support them when they come back out in the community. And if it's all about community safety, then that's what it should all be about.
Which is not really part of the sentence. Sentence is imprisonment, not the punishment inside the prison.
No, that's exactly right. The punishment is supposed to be being outside of the community.
So in terms of your activism, did you achieved anything?
No. I don't believe so. It's all the same people saying the same things. The Greg Barneses, the Rob Whites, we're all out here, we're all saying the same things.
So what do you think could change? Like, is it a generational change?
It is, it's a combination of things. It's not just simply one thing. It is the way we think about crime and punishment as a community. The way we think about people's capacity for change. It's the way we think about justice and what that actually is and what it means for people. So, there's some big things, very big things. Political policy, politics itself. My generation, we have been very shaped by that massive boomer population that we have. Society has been very much shaped because of the numbers of that generation. We've been very much, but I think the generations that are coming up, they're seeing things very differently. They're concerned for the environment. They've got compassion for others. They're connected. They know the importance of social connection, I think, and they value that. Even though it is very simple now, it's a bigger part of their life, when we were growing up, you had to run down the street to go see your best mate, or you had to go to school. Now they're here in your hand, I think if we can nurture the human rights aspect, that mercy and compassion, I think those are the things that will change the system.
You're actually describing the societies, the set of values that the society shares.
Prison comes out of a set of values, right? It's been passed on to us as a way of dealing with problems for a very long time. But in the same way that we have revolutionised the way that we treat people who we thought were problems, i.e. the mentally and physically handicapped, because we excluded them. We thought they were problems, and we were ashamed of them, and we shoved them in an institution to rot and fester and die and be abused. The way that we have revolutionised that, I hope one day we'll revolutionise prisons in the same way. I would like to become a prison chaplain.
When it came to your mind, is this idea?
So I was, about 18 months ago, I was sort of struggling with the futility of my life's work, I suppose. So even though I have a great passion for criminology, that's not the work I do. I work in education, and adult education specifically. And I felt that it was unfulfilling. I really wasn't having, how important is it for someone to get a diploma of business and get a better job? I don't know. It's really not that important. And I just went, it's really not that important. So I felt I wanted to do something that was more meaningful. And I'd always been a Christian. I always felt that I was a Christian. I always felt that I had, I was quite a religious child, I suppose. Went to school, loved Sunday school. I taught Sunday school for many, many years, about 13 years, from the time I was 16 to when the children were a bit older, or till I came to Tassie in 91. So, and so I sort of, was praying about what is it I should do. Like, this life I'm leading is not really doing anything much, and I wanted to have more, fulfillment, more meaning in my life, and that sort of thing. And I want to give back to people, and I sort of, I just felt that that's something I'm really passionate about prisons, but I could never be a social worker. I could never be a corrections officer. I could never work within the system because I don't agree with the system, and I don't necessarily agree with the secular approach to healing people, because I believe that majority of prisoners have been traumatised in some way or other, if not by the system itself and the very process of getting into prison or being in prison. Certainly for a lot, their childhoods weren't ideal.
So spirituality could be a strong muscle in this process.
I believe that there is a big connection. I know we're very focused on our minds as people, Yeah, I think that for healing in particular of emotional trauma, I think that there is always going to be a spiritual element to that. It's about reconciliation. That's really what the whole Bible is about, reconciling people with God. So I think that reconciliation, we're trying to reconcile people with their community. That they have caused harm. They have damaged the community in some way or other. We have retaliated by casting them away. And there is a need for restoration and reconciliation. And so I think as a prison chaplain, I can offer something in that space. And I'm you look at the different different types of criminogenic programs that they offer people, and it's all about it's got to be more than just changing someone's mind about things. It's about changing someone's behaviour. And to do that, you've got to reform their character. And in some ways, that was one of the intentions of prison back in the years before, was reformation of people. Wasn't a good idea, but you know, they did try for a while there to do that, and I think work.
Can you describe like your pathway, your concept, how to make it happen so you can actually do this work?
So I started my Masters of Divinity, and I am now next year or this year, I hope to do a diploma of chaplaincy.
With
Eva Burrows College, which is the Salvation Army. They're the only ones that offer a diploma. You can do a Cert 4. No. So it's distance and and workshop. So it's a bit of both.
So you can do it online?
Some online. Some.
So because your intention is to stay here?
Yeah, my intention is to stay here.
Yeah.
So do that and then see what happens, really. But
can you tell a bit this last rejection? I know
there's another avenue that is potential that I'm sort of starting to explore now.
But can you tell a bit about this first attempt? Because that was first attempt when you went to
So I went to Melbourne seeking ordination with the Uniting Church, and was told, "Bless you, daughter, go and do lay ministry." So they're not going to pay me for that.
And we don't know why they made this decision, because they're not explaining.
No. I'd like to do some research into with prison chaplains around their work and what they do, with the goal of developing a program that is based on two very different things. So on the one side, you've got the Good Lives model, which is a criminogenic rehabilitation theory around how to create a good life. Tony Ward was the creator of the Good Lives model, and he's in New Zealand, I believe. It's the model, one of the models, so it usually is coupled with risk-need responsivity model, and it's one of the models that's chosen as the rehabilitation framework used in Tasmania and in many other places across the world. And it's been used with a variety of different cohorts, from sex offenders through to youth offenders and all sorts of other things. So a combination of the Good Lives model and the what we call Christian spiritual formation. So that's the sort of type of program, or the frameworks that it comes out of. But I think the first step is deciding whether people actually want that or need that. I mean, I think there's a number of it's either, I think a lot of the programs are either in one box or they're in the other box. They're in the secular box or they're in the Christian box, right? And never the twain should meet. So for me, it's about, it's not a teaching program. Mm-hmm. It's about helping people to explore what a good life is for them and how to become a good person, because good people lead good lives. So I'd be a fully qualified chaplain in potentially in 2 years' time.
Mm-hmm. And then you think about wearing some, having some kind of this. Oh, sorry, I'm just trying to imagine you in 2 years. If you will kind of start acting also like a priest and going.
Oh, we'll just be like I am
like
today.
This.
This is who I am,
mm-hmm.
in all my priestly glory.
Yeah.
I'm already a priest according to scripture. So I go already. When I'm rostered on to Ashley. About once a month with the Prison Fellowship Australia. So I'm a volunteer for them.
With kids?
With Friends of Ashley, yeah. So the youth detention facility. And that's wonderfully rewarding. It's great. And we went out there Christmas Eve and gave presents to the kids.
How many kids are there now?
There's 14 at the moment,
14.
Which is a lot. And there's actually a lot more girls than normal as well. So I'll continue working with Prison Fellowship Australia because I've really enjoyed that. And through my contacts now with the Uniting Church and hopefully through the diploma, one of the main teachers at Eva Burrows is a prison chaplain herself in Victoria. So and I've had a couple of conversations with the senior prison chaplain in the Uniting Church in Victoria. So, you know, I'd like to go around Australia. I've always wanted to go travel around Australia in the van.
Mm-hmm. Ah.
And I would like to go and actually, so if I do a minor research project prior to writing the program, it will be, I will go around Australia and interview prison chaplains.
Can you tell me something about your tattoos?
Ah, yes. Yeah. So I have on this arm, it says Mercy Triumphs Over Judgment, which is a passage from the book of James. It's the first part of the passage that trips people up, because it actually says there's no mercy for people who just judge. I had this done last year, beginning of last year, when I decided I you know, that was the path I wanted to go down, was to become a prison traveller. And on the other side, it says remember, and there are 3 symbols. The first one is a heart, and that stands for God is love. The second one is a crown, and that is Jesus is King, because he rules over the earth. And the third one is the well-known symbol of a dove, which is the symbol of the Holy Spirit, which lives in us.